the idea of government, to me, is a voice of the people as a whole. And without a true representation of the communities that are being affected by whatever the policy or the legislation is, then you're not dealing from a democratic perspective. And I think in this space here, because there's such a stigma attached to it because of just the history of marijuana, you got people that really are not dealing with the facts and then addressing their electeds or their local officials to really speak to what their interests are as far as their community is concerned because of the stigma. If I get involved in that conversation around marijuana or cannabis, in spite of the health benefits that we clearly know are functioning in society, now we're in this recreational discussion. People are avoiding it for whatever the issues are. That's not the point. It's legal now. Let's bring our voice to the table. Let's express ourselves. Let's make sure that those tax dollars are going to wherever they're supposed to go to benefit the whole and may indulge and may not indulge. For me, the issue is really a democratic process, like really giving people a voice to express what their interests are and holding our electeds accountable to be transparent, to be considerate, and to be inclusive. And so social equity, as far as what I'm seeing, is one of those pieces that allows for that conversation to be had in a very channeled way.
Thank you. So we mentioned policy a lot, and we have someone who worked on policy. So I'd love to get some insight of just a little bit of background of that policy working with Rex.
Okay, there's a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, I know it's changed a little bit too. The original policy that was put in front of the council definitely got watered down a bit. So it's not exactly the policy that we had intended, but it was really supposed to focus on, and I think what's currently here is focusing on employment, in which we kind of touched on already, a certain employment percentage, as well as touching on opportunities for ownership. And then in actual businesses, we know that there was a cap on dispensaries, so there wasn't a lot of opportunity for social equity applicants to actually be able to own a dispensary. But we do know that there's other opportunity when it comes to cultivation and manufacturing and distribution and testing and everything else that there is. So that's where the opportunity is, and what we have done there is mandated certain percentages of, like your shelf space, for example, that I think it's 25%, something like that. 25% of your shelf space is supposed to be filled with product from a social equity distributor. Now, we know that there's not a whole lot of social equity distributors, and most people are probably not meeting that. It is also, I keep in mind that these are all good faith efforts, and that there's nobody is actually coming out to cite you or to fine you, and if you're making an effort to fulfill these quotas, then that we understand that this is a new industry. It's going to take a while to actually regulate.
Absolutely.
And go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to jump on that. So two things. Number one, we're really fortunate in this city to be able to do the good faith sort of thing. So you see the LBCA, we got Steven here, Pam just walked in. They're major advocates for this stuff. So we didn't have to, it's not like we're sitting there really forcing them to do this, because they're right on board with us. They're like, yeah, we want to be a part of that movement. We want to do this the right way, in a way that benefits the community and all communities in a positive manner. And so that's something, we really are fortunate, and we really thank you, LBCA, for your efforts, because you do make it a little easier on us. Because when you deal with enforcement, now all right, so administrative tickets, or do we pull their business license, or turn off the utilities, or, so, and those become more difficult conversations, and how do you handle that? So it is really nice to have a group that really helps stay on top of that. But I want to get to what you talked about in the first part, and this sort of goes into what you were talking about as well. So the item was watered down because at the city council meetings and beforehand, people are writing letters, they're making phone calls, and they show up to the council meetings and they're like, I don't want this next to my school, I don't want this in my neighborhood, I don't want that, and they're there with very strong voices, and then 2 or 3 people show up to say, oh, well, I'm actually a professional, I use cannabis, daily or monthly or whatever it is. And so those voices were really outweighed. And so even though we got a mandate in the vote, you know, in the general election in the city council chambers, the voices were the other direction. And so that forces, you know, we are representatives. We don't get to just run the city and then tell you, oh, well, that's just how it is. We have to sort of, we're responsible and we're accountable to the people that show up. And so when we talk about democracy, it's not just about making sure that there is this space and we want to make sure that that space is available, but it's also making sure that you show up, because showing up it's more than half the battle. It's the battle.
So just to piggyback off of that, many people have been asking, kind of inquiring about the LBCA endorsing Lena Gonzalez. We like to have a voice in the community, and a lot of people said, why Lena, why are you getting involved with politics? Why does it matter to us? Why does it matter to the cannabis community? For medical marijuana, Lena was actually one of our champions. She was for us. She was for our industry. So as an industry, we have to support the champions who support us. Lena's on a local level. She's running for state senate. We, as Long Beach Cannabis, will have that voice at that state level, at least be in someone's ear who will actually listen. That's why it's important to go out, knock on doors. That's why it's important to pick up a phone call. That's why it's important to show that our community cares and our community has a voice behind us. Because there are people leading it, but it's up to you guys who want to have your own personal voice included. That's why we encourage volunteers. That's why we encourage LBCA members, community members, to get everyone involved. Every single person at this event today is a stakeholder in the cannabis industry, no matter what. There's a reason you're here. So I want to say thank you again for getting in the conversation. We're not done. I'm just very passionate about this.
Can I go further on that?
Go for it.
I'm sorry. I really like jumping on people's points because they spark things in my head. So, you know, when you think about, you know, that one issue that you may disagree with Lena on something or whatnot, this issue, cannabis in particular, is where a lot of the battleground for equity is happening. So it's one of the places where everyone can see the stark differences in how different populations are treated. I know there's like a lot of obfuscation. You watch Fox News, or hell, even CNN isn't fantastic. You know, and there's a lot of muddying of the waters, you know, with when it comes to police action or it comes to other pieces of equity. But when it comes to cannabis, it's clear as day. If I walked out of here 6 years ago with a gram of weed in my pocket and I got pulled over, they'd make me stomp it on the ground. Other people might not be so lucky.
That's right.
And so it's super clear that this is where it goes. And when we create policy for cannabis, so we created a community benefits package that has to do with local hire, has to do with participating in your neighborhoods, giving back to the community as a whole.